Hello everyone, it's time for another video lecture, this time on Kant. We are in my basement, my study, I guess you could call it that. You see some books in the back and some books in front of me and more books and me. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently than the past couple of times. I had outlines of topics previously, just adjusting the camera here, and this time I have the lecture written out, so I'm going to read that. Hopefully it will be clear and you'll be able to follow it and you'll learn something from it. So let's give it a shot. We're looking at our first theory, and it's on Kant, Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher from the 18th century, who has exerted a fantastic influence on the modern world. Although some of Kant's ideas at the beginning may seem a bit strange to you, hopefully by the end and by your reading of the chapter you will come to recognize Kant's ideas as foundational to the way you think about right and wrong. We'll see, for example, that Kant's ideas are at the basis of our notion in the modern world of human rights, which is a very new idea. There was really no idea of human rights until a couple hundred years ago, and Kant is one of the first to try to articulate that. So let's spend some time talking about Kant and be patient with him. Some of his ideas are going to seem kind of severe, you might say, and narrow-minded, but as I say, I think it's very, very helpful to study him because he is the modern world in many ways. All right. The first theory we will examine is a very familiar way of approaching ethical situations and questions. It has some affinities, some similarities, with Christian ethics, for example, the Golden Rule, but it's not based on any religious beliefs. This view says, Kant's view says, that the most important thing about our actions are the intentions behind them. And the only true moral intention we can have is to act out of pure duty. The consequences of our action, while important in many other respects, are not relevant for ethics. Neither are our feelings, which can influence us, Kant says, both for good and for ill. What others think, what others have taught us, cannot tell us what is right and wrong, nor can others ultimately force us to choose right or wrong. In the end, we are moral creatures because we are free and rational. We can stop, put our feelings and circumstances aside, and figure out what the right thing to do is. Holding ourselves to this knowledge of right and wrong is the essence of being moral. I'll read that again. Holding ourselves to this knowledge of right and wrong is the essence of being moral. In other words, Kant says, do the right thing. This theory is known as deontological because it rests on the word deon, or duty, and logia, or logic, in Greek. Immanuel Kant was not Greek, he was German, but he was the greatest duty logic, deontological ethicist, and he continues to influence our world today with his ideas. Rather than using the long word deontological, we and many others just refer to Kantian ethics. That's how epic Kant is. Kant was concerned with something that still bothers many people today, and which we've discussed recently, that is ethical relativism. Ethical relativism says that right and wrong, good or bad, are different for different persons. That's individual relativism. Cultures, that's cultural relativism, or groups. While one group might say that slavery is wrong, another might see it as God's will. While one person might think pornography is cool, another might see it as exploitive and cruel. In such a world, Kant thought, there really is no morality at all, because no one can hold anyone else to any fixed standard. There is nothing we share that we can rely on. If I change my mind, or if my culture changes, then no one outside of my circle can expect me to respect their different views. Reasoning with people or trying to come to agreements on right and wrong beyond our changing opinions would be useless, since we could not depend on anyone keeping their promises, their agreements, or their opinions on right and wrong. For example, we might at one point agree not to steal, but then I might decide that stealing or breaking promises is cool. In short, if it's all relative, morality sort of slips away into chance and opinion. But Kant thought that human beings were capable of more than mere opinion in morality. He thought that we had the capacity to think intellectually, to reason, and to directly grasp right and wrong for ourselves, clearly and firmly. It takes courage and effort to do this, but it is not impossible. And in seeing what right and wrong really mean, we can secure a firm ground on which to build society, its laws, its customs, etc. Kant's writing attempts to take the reader through the steps of finding this true, objective meaning of morality. Kant spends some time clearing the ground of mistakes that we often make about morality. The first mistake is to say that right and wrong are simply what we have learned from others. At first glance, this seems right, since we all learn morality from our parents, from our family, our neighbors, etc. No one arrives in the world with a morality of their own. But a quick glance at this idea shows that what others tell us cannot be the source of morality, especially if they're wrong. If, for example, I'm raised by thieves who teach me that stealing is fine, that doesn't make stealing fine. Conversely, if I'm raised by kind parents who teach me to be kind, that does not make kindness good. This is the point, whatever it is that makes thievery bad and kindness good does not depend on what people tell me. As I grow up, I have to figure out what is right and what is wrong, no matter what I've been taught. In fact, this is often what we mean by growing up, learning to think about moral issues for oneself. Now, this is not the same thing as saying that everyone has their own morality, only that everyone, when they grow up, is responsible for their morality. This leads to one of Kant's key ideas, autonomy. In Greek, auto equals self, and nomos equals law. To be moral is, at the bare minimum, to give yourself the rule or law by which you will act. A 3-year-old is not autonomous because they are still merely following what others tell them about right and wrong. A 15-year-old should be more autonomous, which is why we punish them for doing things we would not punish a 3-year-old for. A 35-year-old should be fully autonomous. No excuses. When they act, they are saying to themselves, this is my reason for acting. I choose this reason. I am free. If I screw up, it's on me. This autonomy, as you can see, is the basis of our idea of responsibility. It's the reason we as a society lock adults up, and why, under extreme circumstances, for example mental illness, we don't hold them fully responsible. But Kant is more interested in the fact that autonomy means that we can hold ourselves responsible. When I act, I can choose which principle, motive, or idea I'm acting on. Kant will argue that true morality has only one motive: duty. To simply do what is right because it is right. He thinks I am capable of deciding why I will do what I will do, and I'm capable of deciding that the reason I will act is out of duty. That is, simply because it's the right thing to do. If we have any other motive than this, Kant believes, we cannot say we are being moral. We'll return to that point. Now, a second mistake. The first mistake was to listen to say that morality comes from what other people have told us. You can see that that's aimed at cultural relativism, right, which seems to take for granted, just seems to assume that the only ideas we can have about right and wrong come from our culture. Kant says this is not the case at all. A second mistake is to look at the consequences of our actions in order to determine right and wrong. Often, ethical people care deeply about how their actions will affect others and the world in general. Now, this makes sense because when we act, we want to accomplish something, usually something good. But we do not always control the consequences of action, do we? For example, I can try to help someone by giving them money, but they might use it for something else. I may tell my friends something troubling in order to warn them, but they might take it the wrong way and get angry. There are many situations where our good intentions do not lead to what we hope for. Do we then say that the action was immoral? Of course not. We know that someone can do the right thing and still not accomplish their goal, and that the world does not guarantee good results from good intentions. Therefore, Kant says, we should not look to consequences when judging the morality of action. We should hope to be effective in the world, of course, but we should remember that the morality of our action does not depend on how things happen to turn out. This leads us to the next key idea. Excuse me. For Kant, morality is determined not externally by consequences, but internally, specifically by the nature of our will. I cannot control external circumstances or consequences, but I can control what I want, what I will. It is the precise nature of this willing, Kant says, that separates good action from bad. Thus, Kant spends most of his time examining the interior world of the human self, including the nature of the will. What is it he wants? What is it, he asks, to do the right thing? What is the proper motive for ethical action? We'll return to that as well. A third mistake is speaking about morality in terms of character or feelings. We often say that a person is good because they love others, because they have compassion, because they feel empathy. In one sense, this is close to Kant's view because it focuses on motivations, not consequences. But Kant denies that feelings can be the proper basis for morality. The simple reason is that feelings change, they come and go, and thus we cannot rely on them for a consistent set of rules or guidelines for actions. One day I may wake up and feel like being generous. The next day I wake up and I'm grouchy. Does my bad mood allow me to avoid responsibility to others? Can I lie to them when I feel like it? Or is lying wrong even when I'm grumpy? Obviously, Kant would say, we don't allow people to get away with bad things simply because they don't feel like being good. We expect them to understand that certain things are wrong even if they feel like doing them. Therefore, our feelings cannot be the final basis of morality. In addition, consider this kind of situation. I find this very helpful to understand Kant. Two rich brothers inherit a lot of money. John is naturally sweet and kind. He feels good and likes to help others. I already don't like this guy, John. He's generous to everyone around him. His brother Bob is naturally stingy and mean. If he had his druthers, he would avoid human contact and keep his money to himself. One day a group of homeless people approached the two brothers asking for a donation to help them to build low-income housing for the community. John, whose feelings tend towards generosity, agrees to help. Bob, who really does not want anything to do with these people, agrees to help. Who is the more moral, Kant would ask? Whose action is more admirable? In a real sense, Kant claims, Bob's action, the stingy guy, Bob's action is more admirable because he had no personal reason or incentive to give. In fact, it went against every feeling he had. Nonetheless, he gave. Kant would say that Bob gave out of pure duty. He understood rationally what was right, and he did it, even though it did not help him or make him feel good. Therefore, his motives were pure. We cannot say this about John, can we? Because he may have been following his natural feelings, and thus, this is Kant's point, did not really choose freely what to do. He just happened to feel that way. That made it easier for him to do it, but he didn't choose in the sense that Bob did. In this sense, feelings cannot be the basis of morality. So let's stick with Bob for a minute, since he represents what Kant has in mind when he talks about a person acting out of pure duty. What can we say about Bob's motives and his thinking in this case? Remember, Kant digs down into our inner lives and asks, what's happening inside a truly moral person when they're acting in a truly moral way? What makes Bob's actions good? Well, we've ruled out his opinions, the opinions of others, the consequences of the actions, his character, and his feelings. What's left? Kant says, Bob must have some way of knowing what is right in this situation. His feelings are telling him no. His circumstances are telling him no. Something else is telling him yes. What is that? Kant says this is reason. This is our intellect. This is the capacity to ask about right and wrong beyond and above our immediate feelings or circumstances. To ask, what would the right thing be, not just for me, in this particular time and place, but what would the right thing be for anyone in this situation? Bob can think beyond the here and now and consider the general rule that should guide anyone in this situation. For Kant, this is precisely what we do when we think about morality. We think about rules. We ask what rule should be applied here. For example, when a friend lies to you, you don't say, you shouldn't lie to me. You say, you shouldn't lie. You expect them to realize that lying is wrong as a general rule. A murderer is not condemned for killing a specific person. They're condemned for violating the rule against killing, which is supposed to apply to everyone. For Kant, this aspect of morality is best described in terms of moral laws. Morality works at this general level, where moral rules are established for all, and all are expected to respect those rules, the moral laws, in every circumstance. You say to your friend, you shouldn't lie. Why are you lying? You're applying a general rule, a general standard, to the specific situation. That's the nature of morality, Kant thinks. So Bob, the grumpy guy, didn't want to do this, but he must have asked himself, what moral rule should apply in this circumstances? What should I do meant to him, what is the moral law that I must respect in this case? In other words, Bob was seeking the law he would give himself. No one else was making him do this. He was holding himself responsible for following a moral law, and he was saying, no matter how I feel, I still want to do the right thing. And the right thing is whatever would serve as a general rule for anyone. So, we are now ready to discuss Kant's main answer to the question of morality. What makes something right or wrong, and how we can know this.